Welcome to Unfixed. This podcast explores the intersection of artificial intelligence and the institution of higher education. I am Zach Justice, Professor of Communication Studies and Director of Faculty Development.
And I'm Nick Janos, Professor of Sociology.
We are employees of Chico State, and we will discuss some of our work, but this podcast is not affiliated with Chico State, and the views expressed here are not representative of the university. Nick, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm especially excited because we have a guest with us today. Ray Schroeder is a senior fellow at the Online and Professional Education Association, a prolific author, and Professor Emeritus from University of Illinois Springfield, where he served in an array of leadership roles. We asked Ray to join us on Unfixed for a conversation about artificial general intelligence and higher education. Ray, welcome to Unfixed.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to join a couple of professors to talk about a topic that I think is so very important to those of us in higher education.
Ray, I know there's a million pieces about your background that we could fill in, but I was hoping you could just take a minute to talk to us a little bit about the pivot. We know you've been writing and speaking about education in online spaces for years, for decades, but you were sort of early to the party for talking about AI and implications for higher ed. What brought that on? Were you just reading the room, or maybe you're best friends with Sam Altman and you're going to break that news here? Let us, what's the backstory?
It is interesting because I've taken just a small amount of flack for that shift, but I felt it was very, very important. So it was in July and August of 2022 that I caught drift of this concept of artificial intelligence, and I saw some videos, YouTubes on the topic, and my mouth dropped open. I was stunned, and of course, the first thought that came to mind is that higher education will never be the same. And so I wrote one column on that. And then pretty much ever since then, have gone with that. Now, my background, an important part, was 20 years of developing, starting in 1997, the online program at the University of Illinois Springfield. And with you, Zach, a communications professor for, decades. So that was really, it turned into a focus to reach students where they were rather than drawing them and requiring them to come to campus. But I saw parallels. I saw online learning growing, and gosh, unfortunately because of the pandemic, but it really has a huge place now in the delivery of higher ed. But I also saw this as a vehicle for delivering learning and much, much more. So that's how all this came together.
Great, that's super helpful and interesting. You were ahead of the curve then, just as you seem to be most of the time here. So Nick and I spotted your writing about artificial general intelligence because we got interested in the topic. And Nick, maybe you could start by just telling the listeners a little bit about some of the challenges and frustrations of trying to pull together that working group on our campus to sort of set the stage for some of this.
Yeah, thanks. Just like Ray, you started looking at the generative AI months before ChatGPT was released. But Zach and I had been writing about, speaking about, generative AI since, January 2023. But maybe a year into that, we started thinking like, well, what's next? Because the world of AI moves so fast. The models were constantly being upgraded, but we also knew that there was this thing lurking out there, artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And so we started like thinking about it and then trying to have conversations with each other, and our minds were kind of melting and and bending in different ways, trying to understand what that future would look like. We started talking to colleagues, but it became really difficult to get people to buy in to thinking about the next generation of these technologies and what that would mean for higher ed. So I don't know, Zach, how we want to, or Ray, how did you get into that sort of next frontier?
Yeah, it's um, let me say that I do curated reading lists, and these started in gosh, way back in the late 70s and early 80s when I was teaching some graduate seminars on emerging technologies in the electronic media. And my students did not, I had required that they at least review 4 current articles on new and emerging technologies. And so, when I got them from People magazine and other topics that didn't seem relevant, I started up this and I used something very new back then, which was called blogs, and began delivering it that way. And an interesting side point was the students in the class who went on to doctorates and ultimately to teach continued to subscribe, and they use those, and we got a great continuing feedback. But nevertheless, um, so it was in combing the media as well as corporations, news releases, associations, research entities that I began these kind of curated readings. And so it really kept me up with what was going on and what's coming next. And I haven't stopped that, so I continue to do those. Now, that led me to the same question you raised. It was, well, what's next? And as I began to see the research was moving toward autonomous use by computers and handing over some of our personal information so that uh, instead of asking individual questions, as in prompts, asking for information, instead we asked for products or outcome. And that's really the difference. You know, looking at saying, uh, I need a memo to the provost that outlines what we've accomplished in our unit over the last semester, and we need to schedule that in the next month. Gather together the data that you can find from our spreadsheets, write that, send it to the provost, schedule a meeting, and I'll be there. And so that's it. It's like having a high level assistant. Um, Whereas so far in generative AI, it's more of a passive assistant that needs prompting,
Hmm.
literal prompting along the way to to carry through all the steps. Whereas as we move toward agentic and then ultimately to AGI, we're seeing uh, that these tools create a plan, a research plan, and you can intervene, but it creates a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to do 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I'm going to fold it together and send it, and it does that. So as you move in that direction, you begin to see more clearly the direction. The biggest question on AGI, uh, uh, artificial general intelligence, is the definition. There are so many definitions. Recently I had a great plenary session, closing session at a conference um, with Ashok Goel, who is the fellow who wrote Jill Watson. Some of you may have heard of her, the first, for anthropomorphizing that, but the first uh, uh, teaching assistant, if you will, that was AI. And he felt that we're about 5 years away. I felt, and still do, depending upon the definition, that we're already there. So that's, I think, a discussion for us to hold, is looking at this next step toward AGI. But no matter what, we are continuing to develop and improve uh, toward a goal of having a truly autonomous entity in AI.
Well, one thing that Zach and I have talked about, and I come at this a bit skeptically, is that the CEOs of the companies developing the technologies love to talk, and just like any technology, they're putting out there's head fakes, there's hype, there's whether it's for the stock market, whether it's for internal morale, whether it's to confuse their competitors, and so each different lab or company from Google to OpenAI and now, of course, Zuckerberg is really coming in hard on this, is saying a lot of stuff in public about what's next, especially around AGI. So how do you interpret all of that or cut through all that?
Great. Excellent question. All of that is happening, and competition has been a good thing in that it has pushed the products, accelerated the products, but a bad thing in that it misleads the public and sometimes overpromises in order to get, raise the price of the stock. But it overall, I think that we're seeing progress, and so I kind of throw away the individual suggestions of what's broadly next. I agree, and there's it's kind of obvious if you look down this highway of AI, you see we're going to get more and more control through the AI itself, and we're going to get faster and deeper thought processes that we've not had in the past. But yeah, certainly we're not getting the whole truth, um, probably from many places today, but among them now, I would include the AI CEOs.
I want to hold there for just a second and maybe talk a little bit more about the definition before we pivot to the higher education implications. Nick and I have had lots of private conversations, some of them a little bit distressed about what AGI is and what that will mean for higher education. And I know you had a breakdown in one of the articles that you wrote for Inside Higher Ed, and we'll link that in the show notes. We I don't want to speak for Nick. I think about it as systems performing at the level of elite humans across a number of domains and the ability to act independently such that then they would function as full replacements, not as task replacements, but as full replacements in a large number of job functions. And the reason why I tend to land there rather than, like you said, thinking that maybe we're there already is that the labs, Nick's right. Like there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of nonsense. Stuff that I don't real inside baseball stuff from Silicon Valley that I don't even understand. Right, but the overt goal of OpenAI from the start was to achieve AGI with a maximum of human benefit, and that may be more smoke, but like that's one of the things that we've used to try and impress upon our colleagues that no, this is real, and whether it's here now or something we need to plan for, right? Like that's what they're doing, and I feel differently about that now than I even did a couple months ago, and a lot of it has to do with this push from Meta and Zuckerberg, where like you can believe that some of this is hype, but Mark Zuckerberg's not writing $200 million checks because he wants to get into headlines. Like he's trying to win a race the same way these other people are, right? And, we can believe it's hype, but like you have people that are putting millions, billions of dollars on the line, betting that that is a fraction of the amount that they're going to make back, either from increases in productivity or job replacement or whatever. one of the things that I talked to Nick about is that Zuckerberg, he's not doing that because he wants to create a more realistic chatbot so that you can pretend you're talking with like Winston Churchill or The Rock or Margaret Thatcher or something, right? Like he's betting, and they're all betting that this unlocks like the tech, Nick, what did we say? Like the tech trees in civilization,
Right.
like that this is the thing that then unlocks the next generation of stuff, that then that's where the money's made. And I mean, we can believe it's, hype or, 20 years away or 10 years away from being 10 years away, like fusion energy. But like for them, it's as real gets, and they're betting their companies on it.
Sure are. And I think, I don't doubt this. And I believe in the lab, we have, a subset of that. In fact, the key components, that is, you've seen the diamond tests where they give the same test to people with various PhDs who've been out in the field for 4 or 5 years, and then they administer it to the different models. And the models are doing just a little bit better, 5%, 10%, maybe in some cases. So if you look at the expertise in one field and with some other accoutrements as far as communication abilities, multi-language, etc., we've got that pretty well produced. But the nuance becomes that we're not single dimension beings, and we have expertise and knowledge that crosses various disciplines, and in some ways, it's a really substantial amount. So it becomes tricky. It's like looking, what's the difference between an associate and a full? Years, right? But those things are out there, and so I think we are on at least the cusp of seeing what most people would consider AGI in a field or in two fields. But and kind of, because if we don't limit it for AGI, then what about ASI? And that's where I get really nervous. Artificial superintelligence, which some would define as a community of experts, so that the AI has the knowledge, ability, facility of 20 or 100 people that
Yeah,
are high level, high functioning.
yeah, I was reading your piece just preparing for this, rereading that one where you talk about the ASI, and I was kind of thinking about even the Gen AI that we have today is better than any of us at knowing the breadth of human knowledge.
Yeah.
And so it's already super in that way, right? It may not have all these other little things that humans, might like to think that we have. And I'm already starting to think that we're kind of at a point where, yeah, we have to type in the prompts, but there's no human being that can return that amount of information in that quickly without having to go learn it and look it up.
Yeah, Nick, you're right on.
Such a good point, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so this will only increase. And there are, ironically, I say this because although I was just up in Washington State and in Portland, Oregon, so just north of your state, but that there are two massive projects underway. One that is 75 or $100 billion. It's Stargate,
Yeah.
Microsoft, and OpenAI outside of Racine, Wisconsin. Now, looking at the water available in Lake Michigan and all of that. And the other is a much smaller project, but it is a DARPA State of Illinois project on quantum computing that is just going up on the southeast side of Chicago. And so so both of these. The first one is the Microsoft and OpenAI seeking to complete AGI/ASI by having a massive computer, the likes of which we've not seen on this earth. And the other is quantum, which in and of itself will accelerate the speed, the capability of AI. And I wrote a little bit about that 2 years ago, I think. And I continue to be interested. I think we're 3 years away from seeing that, but Katie, bar the door. If we have quantum computing, quantum is extraordinarily powerful. And so I think that's one of the additives that's going to further accelerate what we're doing.
I've got to pull us in here. I could talk about this all day, and I'm dying to talk about the geopolitics of
Yeah,
this.
me too.
But Nick and I have some yeah. But I have to promise that we're going to bring it back to higher ed. So um, I was thinking back to this, the thing that Nick articulated earlier with some of the struggle of like getting folks in higher ed to start thinking about what's coming next when so often we're struggling with what is here right now. And I pulled this quote from Community Colleges Daily, and again, we'll include it in the show notes. But I wanted to read this little excerpt as a way to sort of set the stage for what we've just been talking about, what AGI is and the implications that it'll be at versus where we're at right now. So, and this is from Community College Daily. The 2025 Digital Education Council Global AI Faculty Survey found that while 61% of faculty have used AI in teaching, 88% do so minimally. Many remain unsure how to integrate AI effectively. At the same time, Cengage Group shows that graduates feel unprepared for an AI-driven workforce, with more than half saying their programs didn't teach them AI skills. Employers agree. 73% already use AI at work and want new hires who can too. And Ray, I'll just tell you that, like in my role, like this is, these are the challenges that we're trying to meet in real time. And I totally understand that and the sort of realpolitik and real enrollment reasons why we need to meet those challenges. But Nick and I both have an eye towards the future and what comes next. So, thinking about where we are and then, this future that I think the three of us imagine maybe on different time scales, um, you know, make the case for why it is that we in higher ed should start planning now, especially given that we're not even caught up to where things are now.
Well, there are two key pieces at this juncture. I would say the first, which is maybe transitory, we can all hope. I think, there is a system of colleges in California that just got hit with a $200 million or some massive cut and or whatever appropriation cut. Nevertheless, and so we need to find ways to be more efficient in our operations. So just across the board. So whether it be clerical, admissions, the financial division, all of those can be improved. I think as a professor, of 48 years, number one is the student. Number one is we have to prepare our students. We can't prepare them for horses and buggies. We've got to prepare them for what's out there today. And I think we can do this. A couple of quick suggestions. I had written a piece, I don't know, it's just in July, on the topic of a Socratic questioner. And I gave the whole prompt, which is 1,200 words. And by the way, many of our colleagues think a prompt is 8 words. They really think of it as
Hmm.
Google search. This is really Google search. And so I just but this 1,200 words does a fabulous job. And I tested it in Claude, the Anthropic product, but also in ChatGPT and in Gemini. And it worked very well in all of them. And this Socratic questioner greets you warmly, and you give it the topic that you've chosen or you've been assigned to consider and write an essay about, and it begins asking questions. And every question leads to another, to another, to another. And what this does for the student in almost any discipline is it helps build critical thinking. And the Socratic method is kind of a foundation for building critical thinking. And I think it's a wonderful tool. And there's a second tool that Stanford has delivered, which is also free. And Stanford's tool is called Storm, short for brainstorm. And the product creates a virtual roundtable discussing whatever topic you want to bring to it. And it assembles the voices, if you will, or verbally anyway, of experts in the field. And so people start, piping in this roundtable. And then you can add flesh and blood experts, and you're right there at the center of it, asking questions and directing the brainstorming to help you perhaps create new and innovative ways to address that situation. And so that may help you develop innovative or creative thinking as well. And so those are two tools that are free and easy and something you can pop into a lesson plan, somewhere in a syllabus, in your syllabi, and get the students to use AI and to use them in this kind of positive way. And I think each department needs to have in our learning outcomes, which I'm sure you do, or you have learning outcomes for classes and for the degree, that we should include, some facility with AI.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of that work across our program and university. But when I lay awake at night thinking about AGI, or when Zach and I are having breakfast and debating it and talking it over, my mind wanders to the fact that AGI, or even the ASI you were talking about, is really a replacement of the human being. And to me, it raises a whole new set of problems and questions around not just like what is higher education for, but what are human beings for? We don't have to get into that one today, but it really is. It's like we're doing all this stuff and we're incorporating ChatGPT, and it seems like, okay, it's a new kind of computer and it does these new kind of things, and we're going to try to work with it and see what we can do and train our students. But the AGI conversation really starts getting to well, this wouldn't even be necessary. These jobs may not be necessary. My job may not be necessary. I think that's what sort of scares people away from talking about it here at the university, or maybe even just in people in general, is that we begin to get into these much more philosophical and existential questions about what is the future of human work and labor and existence when we have thinking computers that are doing things without us controlling them. So, yeah, I'm just going to throw that out there. So,
Respond to that. Because I too have laid awake and thought about these. And, I really think sociology and communication both will remain valid, viable, and important. Let's see if I can gather. I'll just paraphrase a quote I had gotten from Gemini as I was using it to research a topic. And by the way, I write my own columns, but I use these as research tools. And it said we're moving from an area where we asked for knowledge to one where we're looking at skills and implementing, applying that knowledge. And, I think of that back, I used to love the almanacs and encyclopedias, and there was a treasure trove of knowledge. And college was all about that. And we professors were to profess about mostly knowledge, but also implication. And so where we are now is that knowledge can be picked up like that. And so many fields are changing so rapidly that the knowledge we have at the beginning of the semester has changed a bit. There's something new supplanting something old during the term. What we can gain from AI is the knowledge. But what AI doesn't do well is to communicate it among humans, to seek out the nuanced um, kind of applications that may come from that knowledge and the like. So we need to look at, yes, our jobs may change with more of an emphasis on skills rather than learning the whatever um, the table, whatever, learning a whole table of tools and history. Certainly, it's good to have that anecdotal knowledge, but also you can get it so quickly right now that it's more about the involved ways in which we, as a civilization, can apply that knowledge.
So I appreciate that, Ray. I want to give a concrete example for the listeners, and I wrote about this same thing in one of the blog posts. So, like in terms of thinking about how students will learn what they need to learn, the example that I like is so I teach this class when I'm teaching called Freedom of Speech. I love teaching the class, and I don't mind saying I'm super good at it. I've gotten really good at it over the years. Assignment structures, help guides, like the whole thing. Am I as good at teaching that class as a amalgamation of the founding fathers, Greek philosophers, contemporary critical legal scholars, constitutional experts that provide a customized learning path for each individual student and on demand, unlimited feedback for all of their thoughts in writing? Probably not. I'm probably not capable with that. And that's the kind of thing that may be possible with AGI. And the first time Nick and I sat down and thought this through, I found it really discouraging. But I've spent a lot of time thinking about this thing. Nick and I have a colleague, Logan Smith, who teaches in agriculture, and he shared before, but there was a time in the not too distant history, a couple hundred years ago, when over 90% of humans, that's what we did. Agriculture wasn't a sector. That was just like what everybody did. You worked in ag. We didn't even call it ag. That was just life. And now it's less than 2%. And the things that we're doing now would not have seemed real or like that's not a job. You know, growing potatoes, that's a job. But what you're doing, that's not a real thing. And so I don't know what the next thing will be. And it's probably going to be really disruptive and uneven getting there. But I do think there's probably something on the other side, but I think it's almost impossible for us to imagine right now.
Yeah.
I think
And so it's
I
going to be
think
tough for us to prepare for it. But, yeah.
yeah. Well, I agree, Zach, and I think Nick, you look at sociology. I mean, when we look at society and the interactions and the roles and the levels that get sorted out in income and otherwise, that all is subject to change. And I think we're going to see significant change. One hopes that models are found that, with my personal biases, I believe every human ought to have food, shelter, and health care. And those are my priorities. Maybe not everybody's, clearly not everybody's, but that's what I seek for human beings, and then have freedoms of thought. So, can that be done where AI does most of the work, most of the actual implementation, and especially robotic or embodied AI does a lot of the production? I think it can. And I think that the profits, if you will, from what that does can help the rest of the population maintain those basic necessities.
Yes. So let's take it back to higher ed and the university as we get, wrap up here. But does the university exist in these kind of scenarios? I mean, Zach and I have been writing and talking about that. Even under generative AI that we have today, there's going to be universities that don't make it, even with the tools we have. But with AGI and ASI, does the whole institution that has basically had a monopoly on knowledge and skill building in these domains for hundreds, if not thousands of years, does it cease to exist in a world in which knowledge is just ubiquitous and essentially has no monetary value behind these AI systems? I don't know. What do you think about that?
My vision is that, and it's not that, again, we're reacting to circumstances that have been built beyond our control.
Mm-hmm.
I loved being a professor. I loved those years. That's why I stuck around for nearly half a century. I mean, it was what I wanted to do. But I think that we're going to see a move, and we're already seeing some of it, from degrees, from 4 years down to an amalgam of a lifelong learning delivered, much of it online. Those who are close to campus will come there, but will be in shorter modules such as certificate programs. And we will stack through our lives all the way up until my old age of 75. We'll be stacking these, and they'll be part of our life that will not give up. We will continue to learn and grow from what we will call the university. It will come from those experts that are there, supplemented, supported in part, but by AI. But we will we'll draw on their vision and expertise in order to find the best ways that we can enjoy and appreciate that which we're learning.
Ray, that is such a awesome sum up. Well, I had a final question here, but you actually just answered it in terms of, I'll say Nick and I usually end these episodes with what we call irresponsible speculation, where we just don't source anything and just speculate wildly about what was going to happen. And I said, for this one, we should do responsible speculation, where we instead talk about what are some concrete things that campuses and universities should start doing now. But I think you just provided an excellent answer for that, which is start to think about how it is that we might equip and promote sort of ongoing engagement with lifelong learners rather than thinking about the degree as a one-off. And for what it's worth, I agree, and I hope that that's something that we can push into, because it's not just like I want to do that for our own survival. I think that's needed for the workforce of the future. And I also think that that's needed for the workforce that exists right now. Like the people that graduated 15 years ago that are running their own business, that aren't part of a huge infrastructure with ongoing training, they need to know how it is that this new technology maps onto the work that they thought that they were going to spend the rest of their career doing. And we can fill that need.
And we need to be agile and flexible. And so each of us who are mid-career now at universities need to be flexible, looking ahead, and be creative and come up with ideas that can best serve our learners.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. You can find our writing on meltsintoair.org and connect with us on Blue Sky at meltsintoair.bsky.social and on LinkedIn, Zach Justice and Nick Janos. Find these links and more in the show notes. If you have feedback or want to share an idea, email us at unfixed@meltsintoair.org. Thank you to Jamie Gunderson for producing and editing the show.